Story number 1. The summer when I was followed. I don't even know how to begin other than there's so much I want to talk to you all about. This is a story that even today, well, it still gets to me. Because of this happening, it's understandable why I might get paranoid sometimes. So, let me start from the beginning. For starters, this was about 10 years ago when I was a senior in high school. Also, I was living in Southern California. I remember I'd been dating who I thought was my dream partner for about 3 years, and honestly, I was dreaming of getting married after graduation. I don't know, I guess when you're a teenager in love, it's all you can think of. Well, as it so happened, we ended up going through a pretty bad breakup after prom, and safe to say, I was devastated. Here I thought we would move out into the countryside, build our own little farm, and even start a family together, only for it to end just like that. Disappointed and obviously hurt by what happened, you can imagine the next month before graduation was tough to say the least. I did get through finals and I graduated just fine, but it did take a toll on me. I can recall being so down after school ended because I wasn't sure what my next plan was. It had been about 2 weeks after graduation when my mom suddenly arrived from work one afternoon and said she had something planned for me. Look, honey, I know you've been going through a tough time, so I have something for you to do this summer. Your Aunt Julie and Uncle Tom want you to go spend some time with them out in Kansas. They think it'd be a great opportunity for you to experience something different. And besides, it'll get your mind off of everything. Think about it for a couple of days and let me know. Honestly, it didn't take me a couple of days, because the following morning, I told her I already had everything packed in my suitcase, and I had everything ready to go. So with that, I was off to Kansas to spend some time with my aunt and uncle. Okay, so fast forward a couple of weeks of me staying there. My aunt and uncle were actually able to get me a part-time job working at a grocery store a family friend owned. This is when I would meet him for the first time. It had been about a week of working there when one day out of the blue, this man walked into the store. Now, seeing the same customers every single day, you grew to know the regulars. But this guy was new. I'd say he was probably in his early 50s with dirty blonde hair, a ponytail, and a poorly trimmed beard. Anyways, I didn't mind him too much since he obviously hadn't done anything yet. I mean, he just stared at me sometimes. He had done this not only once, but for about a week. He would never even buy anything either. He would just pretend to read the newspaper at one of the nearby stands, then he walks out about 20 minutes later. Okay, definitely weird, but he still hasn't done anything, so what's the worry, you might be wondering? Well, one day, the phone call started. It had been a month since I'd last seen this guy, and honestly, I was thinking he finally moved on. One night it had just been my coworker Jonathan and I was at the front register, meanwhile Jonathan was in the back. At around, I'd say 8:30 p.m., the phone started ringing. I go to pick it up expecting a customer on the other end wanting to know something, but instead, it goes like this. Hello, thank you for calling our store. How can I assist you this evening? I don't hear anything at first, but that's until I started hearing the heavy breathing. At first, I didn't know what it was, so I said, Excuse me, but you're going to have to speak louder. I can't really understand what you're saying. There's a pause in the noise for about 5 seconds, and that's when I hear somebody on the other end say, Hey, I just wanted to say that I really like your shirt. That owl, I love it. I froze. How did the other person on the other end know my shirt had an owl on it? Just like that, there is this sudden bright light by the front door. Then, I can see as a shadow runs off into the parking lot. Instantly, I could think of a couple of explanations. The light must have been from a camera, and whoever was at the front entrance had been watching me. This was when I started thinking about the man from about a month ago, and instantly, I became paranoid. Could it be they'd been keeping a watchful eye on me all this time? Just as a side note, the store was empty at the time when this took place. Regardless, I quickly run to the back and I go tell Jonathan about what happened. He was just as confused as I, since he told me he had been in the back organizing things and he never saw or heard anything. It was definitely weird, but I tried to put it behind me, thinking maybe it was just somebody's idea of an innocent joke. Again, about a week went by and nothing happened. Again, I was at the store with Jonathan and both of us were at the front, just talking about random things. That's when suddenly the phone started ringing. This time, Jonathan grabs the phone as I attend to a customer who just walked up with some chips and a soda. Okay, sir, that'll be $5.75. Thanks again for stopping by. Come back soon. Hey, sorry to bother you, but your uncle's calling you. I guess he needs to talk to you about something. Wait a minute, my uncle? But if he really needed to talk to me, couldn't he have just left a message on my cell phone? I look over at my cell phone, but I don't see any missed calls. Well, as I say goodbye to the customer who just left, I pick up the phone. Hi, Uncle Tom. Did you need something? Hey there, precious. Remember me? It's your good friend. You haven't forgotten about me yet, have you? Safe to say it wasn't my uncle. It was the man from before, and once again, he was at it. This time around, I finally had enough, so I tell him, Look, I don't know who you are, but you need to stop, otherwise I'm going to be calling officers. You can imagine, Jonathan was confused by what I was saying. All I hear after this is laughing, and finally, Okay, fine. You'll be seeing me again really soon. That was the end of the call. This time around, we contacted my manager and he had me work in the mornings with him instead. That should have been the end of it, but no. By now, I had somebody walk with me to and from my car because we were starting to expect somebody had been following me around all this time. We had called officers and we did tell them about it, but since we didn't even know who the guy was or have too many details, there wasn't much they could do. One day after work, my manager and I were walking to my car, and that's when we saw a note on the windshield. I went ahead and opened it up to see what it was, and it reveals something I would never forget. It was a picture of me walking up to my uncle and aunt's house, as well as a message that said, See, you can't hide from me forever. Soon after that, there would be nights when I would see this suspicious RV driving down my street slowly. Each and every time I noticed it, it would stop at the front of the house for about 30 seconds, then take off with a purpose. Again, I called officers, only this time I gave them the license plate number, as well as the description of the RV. Safe to say they found the RV abandoned on the outskirts of town, and sadly, they found no one. The last thing to happen was arriving home to my aunt and uncle's house and finding a note on the door. The message said, I'll be coming for you real soon. I can't wait for all the fun we're going to have together. That was finally enough for me. Safe to say I stopped working at the convenience store and I returned back to my home in Southern California 2 days later. Things pretty much settled down after that, and my uncle and aunt said they no longer saw any other notes. As for the calls to the store, they pretty much ended as well. Story number 2. The Man in the Warehouse Basement. At the time this strange stuff started happening, I was working at a warehouse for a fairly small series of grocery stores out in the upper Midwest. This occurred during winter time, so one can imagine that alongside the cold temperatures, snow accompanied my nightly routines. The thing with this warehouse was that it was essentially out in the middle of nowhere. Now, no, I don't mean out in the countryside where all around you were miles of fields. I mean, it was sort of in this lonely industrial area that was on the other side of town. You didn't have any homes out here, and you surely didn't see any shops or restaurants. All you would see were these tall, lonely buildings, which honestly, I thought they were abandoned. Regardless, I was working at this warehouse for the winter time in order to save money to buy a ring for my girlfriend. Let me explain this warehouse a bit. Right when you walk in at the front, you are welcomed by a series of aisles, each holding different products and food. One aisle was dedicated to dairy, the other was dedicated to vegetables and fruit, etc., etc. At the very back of the warehouse, you had a series of offices that had a break room and also a room where the manager would do his work. I should also mention that the warehouse was connected to another building which had a basement. Normally, we didn't go down there, but there would be times I'd be working at night only to see that the door for the basement was open. Down there, we stored extra boxes and even supplies for cleaning. Here's the thing. In order to get to the basement, you had to get in there by the actual entrance of our warehouse. This meant the only people down there would be workers. Each worker claimed they had never stepped foot in the basement, as they had no reason to be down there. It was definitely weird and unexplained, but we never paid too much attention to it. I should also mention that I'm fairly small. I'm 5'7" and I weigh about 150 pounds. Also, I was still a senior in high school. Anyways, one night I'd been working from midnight until 6 a.m. Every time you worked there, you would also have to work with somebody else alongside you. My coworker was a couple of years older than me, and for this story, we will call her Irene. So the night started off fairly normal, with Irene and I stocking food and opening boxes of products. Everything was going fairly well. That was until around, I'd say, 4 in the morning. At this point, Irene and I were in the break room drinking coffee and we were just talking about random things. At some point, we both heard the undeniable sound of something crashing. This sends Irene and I running into the warehouse, only to notice a couple of things. For starters, there is this very cold breeze entering the warehouse. As we started walking down the aisles, we noticed that one of the front doors was wide open. We can now see as snow is starting to enter the building alongside the cold wind. Yes, it had been fairly windy that evening, but these were large metal doors. You had to have a lot of force to open them. This was when we called one of the security guards who was working at the front, and here's how it went. Hey Sam, are you inside the building or something? What's up with the door being opened? Not sure what you're talking about, friend. I've been out here in the front all night. Why? What's up? I explained to him what happened, but we just explained it away as the wind and left it at that. As for the crashing sound, we began walking around to find that a couple of boxes containing vegetables had fallen over. Unfortunate, but whatever, we would clean it up. Well, as it turns out, our mop was missing. This would mean I would have to go over to the lonely basement that was on the other side of the building. I'm sure you can tell where this is going. Irene stays behind as I started making my way beyond the double large doors. It's funny, because once you were in the other building, it seriously felt like you were in an entirely different world. It's like the hallway you walked into was sort of like a portal. Anyways, moving on. As I grabbed the keys to the basement, I once again noticed it was open. Funny, perhaps Irene was down here earlier. Either way, I started heading down the stairwell with only my phone as a source of light. Just so you know, this is a pretty old basement and there wasn't really much room to hide. This was why when I started to hear movement, I instantly froze. Okay, Irene, that's enough messing around. You can come out now. Logically speaking, I'd seen Irene less than 5 minutes ago. The only way for her to be down here was if she walked the same way I did. I guess this was my way of trying to explain the noise. Suddenly, I am welcomed with the sight of somebody in a hoodie, and he's stepping out from behind a stack of boxes. That sight was enough to make me freeze, but regardless, I had to tell him, I'm sorry, sir, but you can't be down here. This is private property. I'm going to need you to leave, otherwise I'm going to have to call security. This was when he bends down and he grabs a large metal bar that I hadn't seen from where I was. Is that so? Too bad no one's going to hear you after what I do to you. It doesn't take a genius to figure out what I do next. Immediately, I started running up the stairs as this guy started heading toward me. As I stepped through the door of the basement, I can feel a breeze of air as the metal bar literally misses me by a few inches. Had he connected, it probably would have been the end of my story. Thankfully, his aim was bad, and I go running back to the warehouse, where immediately I'm telling Irene we needed to get out of the building. What are you talking about, dude? What's up? Just follow me. Trust me. As we're running, I'm calling security and I'm explaining what had happened. Yeah, Irene's expression changed as I mentioned the details. Well, long story short, alongside officers and the security guards, they ended up finding a man who was in the other building hiding. They took him away and we never did see him again after that. It's just crazy to think that somebody had managed to make it inside the building without being seen. I'm just glad it wasn't Irene who'd gone down to the basement. I wouldn't have wanted something bad to happen to her. Story number 3. Strange knocking at the door. Unexplained stories. You know what's really interesting about them? It's that no matter what you think, you can never truly begin to understand what happened. Therefore, I would love to share with you all this series of experiences that had started all of a sudden. At the time this took place, I was living in a small apartment complex out next to a set of woods. There were about 6 rooms to this building, but only about 4 were in use. The others pretty much sat empty. I'd been living here for about a year and I never really had any issues. That's until I started noticing the minivan. As I mentioned, I lived next to a set of woods. The nice thing about them was that there was both a road and a trail that could be used. The road connected you to the other side of town where cars could drive on, and the trail will lead you further into the wilderness. This trail was used by people either walking their dogs or those who chose to ride on their bicycles. At the end of this trail, you are welcomed by a park and lake that was right next to it. It was actually used quite a bit by the locals. Well, I'd been walking around 7 p.m. one evening with my dog Ben when I started noticing a series of headlights. This was weird, as where I'd been walking, the road for cars was at least half a mile away. Vehicles are normally not allowed here unless for whatever reason there's park rangers working in the area. Strange, but I stepped to the side hoping whoever had been driving down the trail would just pass me by. They never do. I could still notice Ben and I's shadow on the ground as the headlights lighted the ground in front of us. This was when I finally turned around and I could see a dirty blue minivan that sat idle about 100 feet from us. I started to get a bit nervous, so Ben and I started to walk a bit faster. All the meanwhile, the minivan kept up with us, albeit a bit slowly. At this point, I'm more confused than anything, and I actually started running. Eventually, the minivan gets on the actual road and drives off into the night. That was only the beginning of what was to come. Fast forward to later that evening. It was, I'd say, around 3:30 a.m., and I was just getting up to use the restroom. I take care of my business, then for whatever reason, I head over to the front living room window to look out the window. As a quick note, my room was on the second floor, and I had a perfect view of the parking area in front of the building. The thing with this parking lot is that it's pretty dark. There are only 2 street lamps, but they're pretty old, so the lighting isn't exactly the best. What I could see just beyond one of the street lamps was what looked to be like the same minivan I'd seen hours earlier. I was a bit confused by this, but since I was so tired, I ended up ignoring it and returning back to bed. Fast forward a couple of nights later, it had once again been another evening of me staying up until 4 in the morning watching some movies on Netflix. Suddenly, at around 4 a.m., I was surprised to hear knocking at the door. This was weird because as far as I knew, all the neighbors were fast asleep. As far as I know, I was the only one who stayed up late. This was when Ben started barking, and I began getting a feeling like I shouldn't open the door. Safe to say, I ended up ignoring it, and alongside that, the knocking stopped. Definitely weird, but I talked to the neighbors in the morning and I'd mentioned the knocking. None of them had any clue what I was talking about, and each of them said they had been fast asleep at the time. Weeks went by and nothing happened for the most part. I do remember, however, that I saw a blue minivan that matched the same one I'd seen about a month ago. It was parked on the other side of the Walmart I was working at. It could have been a coincidence, so I just ended up ignoring it. Well, one night, my cousin ended up spending the night with me and we'd been playing video games. At around 2 a.m., we started to hear knocking, only that there seemed to be a rhythm to it. Ben started whining, and my cousin and I started to get a strange feeling about this. Carefully, I go to look through the little window next to my door, but I don't see anyone there. I'm all about having enough at this point, so I call the owner of the building, disregarding that it was late. Annoyed by my late night call, I explained what was happening, but she claimed she had no idea what I was talking about. Understandable. Once again, that was it. I saw no cars in the parking lot this time, nor did I see any signs of anybody outside. Months ended up going by and nothing else seemed to have happened. Again, it's another night alone, and I started hearing the knocking at my door. This time around, I wasted zero time calling officers, and they searched the entire area. They don't find anyone, but they do manage to find an abandoned blue minivan that was parked about a quarter of a mile down the trail in the woods. After looking into it for a little bit longer, nothing else came up, and I never did renew my lease. I never got an answer to the knocking, and I never found out who the person in the minivan had been. It's safe to say that both were connected to each other, but what really gets to me is the paranoia that followed months after. Even though I moved hours away, I would get nervous any time I'd see a blue minivan. I guess if anything, I have a question. Anybody else out there ever experienced something like this? It'd be interesting to hear how you handled the situation. Story number 4. My experience in Australia. Back when I was studying abroad in Australia, I was living in a series of flats and apartments that were located outside of town. It's funny because just a bit of ways from us, you are welcomed by all the commotion in the restaurants, traffic of cars and people walking about, and just like that, it changes in about 20 minutes. I guess our little neighborhood, if you wanted to call it that, was sort of this private little community. It was one of those more fancier areas that you'd have to go through an entrance with a security officer first. This was why we never expected this to happen. I'd only been living there for about a month and I was told that there'd been a recent break-in at one of the nearby neighborhoods. It did cause our little community to be more aware of our surroundings, but we didn't mind it too much. Anyways, even though I do have a roommate, I mainly spent my time alone as she often traveled for her work. It was nice because this allowed me to do pretty much what I wanted without being bothered. So, one evening, I'd been out pretty late and I'd returned from campus after spending time with my group working on a project. I'd say it was around 1 a.m. and I got up to go outside to let my roommate's dog use the restroom. Yeah, she left me in charge of her dog. Not that I minded it too much, after all, she paid me for it. As we're in the front yard, I couldn't help but notice somebody standing by one of the neighbors' cars. Mind you, it's pretty late right now, and most of the people here have to work early in the morning. Strange to see somebody out at this time, but regardless, I look over to him while I waited for the dog. I don't know, but something about him made it seem like he was out of place. Perhaps it was the jacket and hat combination he had going on, or maybe it was because he was wearing sunglasses at night. Out of nowhere, another person in a dark jacket with a ski mask on comes walking from behind the neighbor's house, and he's holding what appears to be a crowbar of some sort. Not sure how to really describe it. You see, he looked very skinny and almost as if he was hiding something in his pockets. Either way, they couldn't see us because of the fence in front of me. I only saw them through the small openings. Anyways, I watched as both of them stepped into an SUV and they drove off. See, I should mention that during this time, the back entrance to our neighborhood was under construction. Therefore, it was open. This would mean that people would often come park on our streets. Quite annoying, but the city put up signs saying that nobody could park there unless you lived there. The next morning, I ended up calling the neighbors and I told them about the suspicious people I'd seen outside her house. She said she had no idea what I was talking about, and she had been asleep the entire time. She did, however, describe hearing what sounded like footsteps, but she ignored them thinking it was one of the neighbors. Of course, we mentioned it to the security guard that was working that night, but he hadn't seen the vehicle. Figures as much. And so I ended up calling the nearby officer station, and I reported it to them. I told them that we might have seen a potential break-in. They were definitely interested by the details, and they said they'd keep a better watch out for us. The next night I returned from spending time with a friend from campus, and as soon as I walked up onto the street, I noticed a familiar vehicle. This time around, it was parked in my driveway. As a quick note, it's about 1 a.m. My best guess was they had memorized the security guard's schedule and they had waited until they changed between guards. I mean, how else did they get in? Either way, I hide behind a tree and I called the nearby officer station yet again. I explained to them that the suspicious people had returned, and immediately they said they would send somebody out there. This was when it happens. About 5 minutes go by, and I'm watching my house, expecting whoever was in there to step out at any time. Suddenly, I started to hear footsteps behind me. I turn around, and right next to the neighbor's fence, I am face to face with a man in a ski mask. I froze as he looked like the same person from the other night. "What are you doing out here? You better have not called the officers on us." I now watch as he reaches into his pocket and he appears to take something out. It was obscured by the fence, but I knew I wasn't about to stick around and find out what he had on him. I take off running, only to be welcomed with the sound of sirens heading my way. I was so relieved that help had finally arrived. Quickly I point to where I had seen them, and they take off looking for him. In the end, they find the two men who had actually gotten inside my house, and even the neighbors. Needless to say, I was face to face with one of them, and had things not turned out the way they did, it might have been the end for me. I'm just happy that wasn't the case. Story number 5. Why I love my pet dog Jackson. I've recently stumbled upon this community, and I have to say, I love it. Hearing people's stories and experiences and the life lessons they teach you, what a great way to turn a negative into a positive. I know they don't always end too well, but if it's one thing I recommend, it's having some sort of pet. This makes me thankful for the dog I had at the time. So, let me take you back to the summer of 2005. I was just about to start high school, and as any other teenager my age would do, I enjoyed spending time playing video games. I was really into the PlayStation 2, and I can recall all the nights I would have friends over as we played into the early morning hours. Though those times were fun, this is about a time when I was by myself. See, it was just my mother and I at the time, so every day I was home alone. I did have our pet dog Jackson with us, so it wasn't too bad. Jackson was a 2-year-old German Shepherd who we had recently just received from a good friend of my mom's. He was honestly like my little brother as he spent most of the day by my side. This was why my mom was never worried too much. As for a quick layout on her house, it's a 2-bedroom, 2-bath house in a fairly quiet little neighborhood. We always thought of our neighborhood as the safe one, as you never heard about anything happening. Actually, the last time something happened was about 5 years ago, and that was just somebody breaking into a car and taking the radio. Sadly, they never did find the person. But regardless, we never worry too much. I'm getting ahead of myself. The point is, one afternoon, it had been Jackson and I'd been in my room. I still remember. I had my PlayStation controller in one hand and a large lemonade in the other. The air conditioning in my room was set to maximum level, and I was busy playing Kingdom Hearts. All of a sudden, everything went dark. The TV turned off, the air conditioning no longer gave out cold air, and I was left confused. As I stepped out of my room, I finally realized that there was no power. Great, there went my afternoon. Since my mom wouldn't arrive until around 8 p.m., I figured that this could be the perfect excuse to go swimming in her backyard swimming pool. That's what Jackson and I ended up doing for the next couple of hours. See, what ended up happening was some of the transformers stopped working, and so the power company was working on fixing them. I guess that's what happens when so many people had their appliances on at the same time. Either way, they ended up going house to house and telling us it would take them at least until 10 p.m. to get the power back. Okay, well so far nothing bad has happened yet, but hold on, I'm getting to it. I'd say about 20 minutes later, there was a knock at the door. Okay, well maybe it's one of the technicians coming back to give me more information. No. Instead, I opened the door to a man who I'd say was in his 30s. He's wearing dark denim jeans, a denim jacket, along with glasses and a hat. Funny considering it was almost 100 degrees outside. I was confused by his sudden arrival, but all he said was, "Oh, sorry, I must have the wrong house. I thought the house was empty." Then he just turns around and gets in his Hummer and he drives off. It was definitely weird, but I left it at him getting the wrong house like he said. Eventually, I forget about it, as now I take a nap underneath one of the large beach umbrellas we had in the backyard. Another thing to note is I also had the windows open, so the house wouldn't get too warm. I didn't want the food in the refrigerator to go bad, which explained why I was trying to keep it as cold as possible. Yeah, not a smart idea to keep everything open like that, but I was young and I was naive. Hey, well in my defense, I did have Jackson there with me, so he could teach anyone a lesson if they try to get in. Anyways, I was napping when all of a sudden, I am awoken to Jackson barking non-stop. This was confusing, so I get up trying to look for him, and that's when I see him towards the other side of the house. Annoyed, I start walking over confused to what all the commotion was about. Well, thank goodness for Jackson being there, because staring back at me from inside the house was that same man from a couple of hours ago. Only this time, he was wearing one of those orange and yellow outfits that you see construction workers wearing. Jackson wasn't having any of it, and I wasn't either. "Excuse me, sir, but didn't I just see you a bit earlier? What are you doing inside my house?" "Sorry about that. It's just that I needed to get inside your house to check your power. Don't worry, I'm with the power company." I wasn't trusting him, so I tell him, "Okay, well, if that's true, You wouldn't mind if I called officers and had them talk to you, do you? He stands there staring nervously for about 10 seconds, and then he says, Not a problem at all. Just excuse me for a second. I need to get some tools from my car. Jackson and I watch from the backyard fence as he gets inside his unmarked Hummer. He takes off without saying another word. Safe to say he wasn't going to get any tools. I never did see him again after that, and we did eventually get our power back. Story number 6. My dog was my hero. I am currently in college, just starting university here in California. Today, I wanted to share with you this Home Alone story of mine. I'm 18 now, but this was 3 years ago when I was 15. Now, before I moved away, I was living with my mom and dad out in Anchorage, Alaska. Our home was in a pretty quiet neighborhood, albeit the occasional plane you would hear fly every other 20 minutes. Our home was located at the end of the street, where you would have to turn around and exit had you chosen to leave. This is important, as many cars would use our driveway to turn back down the street. I guess it didn't help that there were no signs. Regardless, it was the beginning of January, and both my parents had returned to work. At home was my Siberian Husky buddy and I, as we spent the day watching TV or just napping by the fireplace. It was awesome, but this one afternoon ended up changing everything. You see, in case you're new to Alaska, then allow me to explain January. It's a very interesting month. Not only is it cold and does it snow a lot, but there's only about 4 hours of sunlight, if you really wanted to call it that. This would mean that by 3:30 p.m., it's already getting dark, and it looks like it's later than it should be. My mom and dad wouldn't be home until around 6 p.m., so imagine my surprise when I see headlights light up our living room window. I was confused by this, so I take a look out through the curtains and I can see a car idle in our driveway. This didn't seem to be my parents, but regardless, I watched as they turned around, then proceeded down the road. Okay, no worries, I guess. Like I mentioned, this happens quite a bit. It's now about 4:30 p.m. and my mom calls me. Hi, honey. Just to let you know, your dad's going to bring us pizza from Costco after work, so make sure not to eat anything beforehand. Awesome. I love Costco pizza. It's my favorite. Seriously, we always make it a special night anytime my dad brought pizza. Usually he would rent a movie, then we would watch movies until around midnight. I'm getting ahead of myself. I figured that in the meantime, I would go ahead and take a nap to make the time go faster. So, along with Buddy, we head over to our usual spot by the fireplace, and we take our nap. About an hour later, it's around 5:30 p.m., and I started to hear Buddy whining. This usually means he has to go outside, so I get up and we start heading over to the back door. The back door was located in the kitchen, and it leads to our fenced-off backyard. This was when I am face to face with a sight I would never forget. As I reach the entrance of the kitchen, the back light suddenly turns on. This only happens if there's movement in the back. Well, what do you know, as I'm just a couple of feet away from the door, I'm face to face with a man I've never seen before. I was still in the process of waking up, so I thought perhaps it was my dad. Yeah, safe to say it wasn't. This was when Buddy started barking. In that moment, it made me realize something was wrong here. So, as loud as I could, I say, "Leave now. I'm going to call officers." I mean, the phone literally was right next to me, so why not grab it and start dialing? I wasn't even connected to the dispatcher yet, when suddenly he takes off running. I then hear the sound of the backyard fence opening, followed by a car engine. Finally, I can hear the screech of tires as this person drives away. Sadly, since I never did get the license plate, there wasn't much I could do. Well, just as expected, you can imagine the surprise when my mom and dad got home seeing all the activity at the house. They ended up explaining what happened, and we're just thankful nothing too serious happened. Safe to say that Buddy didn't really have to go outside so much, but he was instead warning me about the stranger outside the house. Thanks, Buddy. Story number 8. Why I don't like stopping on road trips. Road trips. You know what I enjoy about them so much? Sure, it's the destination and going to see family, but it's also the sights to see as you're traveling. This occurred at the end of October of 2015 when I was going to visit family for Halloween. As quick background context, I was 19 years old when this took place. I'm fairly small, about 5'5", and I weigh about 115 pounds. Not the most intimidating person in the world. So, for whatever reason, I had chose to drive to see my parents instead of flying. I figured since I've never gone on a road trip before, I could use this as an excuse to do something different. So I decided to take the scenic route. I was taking Pacific Coast Highway in California, driving from San Francisco down to Los Angeles. For those who live here, they know it takes a while to drive on Pacific Coast Highway. In turn, you're welcomed with a beautiful sight of the coastline. That in itself made the drive all worthwhile. Anyways, I ended up leaving at around 10 a.m. that morning, and I was expecting to arrive at my parents' house later that evening. Of course, as it so happened, there were plenty of accidents along the way, so the trip ended up taking longer than it should have. I can remember I was still about 2 hours from home and it was about 7 p.m. I was essentially out in the middle of nowhere, and I arrived at a point where I needed to use the restroom. I was at McDonald's about an hour ago, but I guess I had too much Dr. Pepper. Therefore, I knew I had to stop somewhere. Sadly, I didn't see any towns to stop at, but I did see there was a rest stop about 20 minutes out. Okay, well, why not, I thought. Here's where I meet him. Eventually, I can see a sign for an exit that appears to go quite a bit of a ways out into a field. I was almost considering holding it in, but nature was calling and she wasn't too happy. So, in the dark of the night, I pull into this abandoned-looking stop area that had a small building with restrooms. There were a couple of benches with tables and even some vending machines too. Well, I go ahead and take care of my business, and as I'm washing my hands outside, I happen to notice an SUV parked a couple of parking spots next to mine. Okay, well I guess they were in the other room, so I didn't really pay attention too much. Since I was here, I figured I could go ahead and get some snacks from the vending machine. So I take out a couple of dollars and I press the buttons. As the vending machine is dispensing my candy bars, I happen to look up, and at that exact moment, I could see the outline of somebody standing by one of the nearby lampposts. I actually had to do a double take since I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. No, now there is no one. Okay, so my eyes were playing tricks on me, that's all. Wrong. As I started heading back to my car, I could hear the sounds of footsteps. At first I couldn't see anyone around me, but that's until I actually got in my driver's seat. Out from the other parked car steps out a man who immediately runs over to my passenger's side and tries to open the door. I knew now this was going to be one of those typical situations where things weren't going to turn out well for me. The seconds seemed to have gone on for hours, as all I could think about was if the door was locked. Thank goodness that as he tried to open it, I could see that it was indeed locked. All I'm able to hear is him shouting at me, telling me to open the door and all of this other nonsense. Needless to say, I book it out of there and don't stop until I make it to my parents' house. I'm not exactly sure what it was, but I did hear a story about somebody spending the night at a rest stop, then having somebody break into their RV in the middle of the night. I'm pretty sure both situations weren't related, but it's pretty concerning to think about regardless. Story number 9. That one time we went camping. Anyone else love camping out in the woods? Really? Only me? Okay, I'm kidding. I know how many of us enjoy camping and being out in the wilderness. See, growing up in Montana, I've pretty much been all about exploring nature. I don't know, I was never really the kid who played video games or used the computer growing up. Perhaps it had to do with barely owning any technology, or perhaps because my parents were old school, but I always grew up playing in the backyard or in the nearby woods. Therefore, it's no wonder I had plenty of experiences in those woods. However, none will come close to this wild encounter. It happened around my junior year of high school when I had a friend over at my house. We were both 17 at the time. Anyways, this one afternoon I'd come up with the brilliant idea of going out into the nearby woods and spending the night out there. This was actually my friend's first time ever out in the woods, and I wanted to make sure she enjoyed it. Therefore, along with us, I'd brought my 5-year-old Siberian Husky. For this recollection, we would call my friend Mindy and my dog Marley. So, with Mindy and Marley, we set out into the nearby woods and spent the afternoon walking around and trying to find the best place to camp. After about 2 hours of walking, we ended up deciding to camp near my house, about a quarter of a mile away. I guess as it started getting dark, Mindy wasn't too fond of staying miles away from the house. Whatever. With some firewood we gathered earlier, we started ourselves a little campfire. It was nice. Ourselves, along with Marley, we sat there looking up at the stars and telling funny stories. Fast forward some time later, and it's about 11 p.m. The night is starting to wrap up for us, and we figured now would be a great time to get some sleep. In we step into the tent as we get into our beds and get ready to wake up early the next morning. At around, I'd say, 4 a.m., I had started to hear footsteps outside our tent. Now, these weren't footsteps you would expect to hear from a person. Instead, they sounded quiet, like whatever was making them was doing their best not to be heard. Also, these footsteps weren't too heavy, if that makes any sense. Nonetheless, it was sounding more like a wild animal than anything. I'll admit if now I was the one who started to get nervous. See, there are mountain lions that live in these woods, but I'd never once seen one. I always thought it was just a way to keep the kids out of the woods, but I was wrong. I now started hearing the low growling of a large cat, and I knew in that moment there was a mountain lion walking just inches away from our tent. I can remember I started sweating, thinking that at any moment this thing was going to jump at our tent. Surely that would have been the end of it. I'm half expecting Mindy to wake up at any second and give away where we were, but she doesn't. This is, of course, until Marley suddenly gets up from his sleep. Then he starts barking and growling back. This causes Mindy to wake up confused, but I'm telling her to be quiet. Well, Marley decided he wasn't going to let whatever was out there get to us, because immediately he takes off outside. Yeah, as it turns out, Marley is one brave Siberian Husky. In summary, he does chase the mountain lion away, and we're thankful for his help. Needless to say, we ended up leaving our things and running back to the house. In the morning, we ended up returning with my dad in his car, and we picked up our things. What we found were claw marks on our tent, which obviously showed signs of a mountain lion. As for the tent, well, it had seen its better days. Yeah, if Marley wasn't there with us, then it's pretty concerning to think what might have happened to us. Story number 10. Not exactly a fan of walking at night. This happened quite a while ago, but now that I've had time to write it out, I've remembered it better. Here's how it goes. It was back in the early 2000s, and I was in high school. This was during a time when the library was just getting computers for the community to use. This was great because if I didn't finish a writing assignment at school, I could go to the library to take care of it there. Now, my school did allow students to rent laptops, but since there were so many students, you can imagine it was hard to get a reservation. One evening, I was working on a writing assignment at the library, and everything was going good for the most part. At some point, I remember this guy walked up to me and he sat at the computer next to me. I mean, there were so many other computers open that afternoon, but no, he had to choose the one next to me. Seriously, it's so annoying. It's like when you park in a parking spot away from everybody, only for that one person to park right next to you. I mean, come on. I'm getting ahead of myself. The point is that he just sat there not doing much. I do remember he was looking at cars or something, but he kept wanting to talk to me. Hey, how old are you? What school do you go to? Pretty much things like that. I was starting to become uncomfortable, so I ended up saving my document and leaving shortly after. That should have been the end of it, but of course, there's more. Not expecting to see him again, I start making the 10-minute walk home. I bet you know where this is going. It's now 7 p.m. and it's dark, and I'm about to cross the street to head over to my neighborhood. Suddenly, I started hearing a voice call out to me from behind. Hey, excuse me, wait up. I turn around and it's the stranger from the library. I should have just run right there, but I stopped thinking I would give him a second chance. I just wanted to say that I think you forgot your wallet back at the library. I knew he was lying. I never had a wallet with me. At the time, all I had with me was $20 and my ID in one of my pockets. Sorry, sir, but I don't have a wallet. Thanks. Have a good night. Apparently that wasn't enough because he reaches out to me, but it's not before I'm able to move away. That's when I finally take off running, and I'm screaming and shouting as loud as I could. Luckily for me, there is a nearby security guard stepping out of a convenience store. I run up to him and I'm doing all I could to explain what was happening. Sadly, by the time I'm able to get my message across, the man is gone. When all was said and done, I never did see him again, so I don't know exactly what he had planned. Phew, well, that was quite a bit of storytelling, wasn't it? Hey, I hope you enjoyed this set of brand new stories. It was truly an honor to have you around listening. As I mention in all my videos, tell me what you thought about the stories featured today. Which one did you like the most? Or better yet, which one could you relate to? Tell me down below, it's great to hear from you. Speaking of hearing from all you wonderful people, it's that time. You know it. It's question time. I've actually wanted to know this for a while, so here it is. How do you spend your time listening to these stories? Do you listen to them while trying to fall asleep? Or maybe you're getting ready for work? Or who knows, maybe you're playing your favorite video game and you're listening along. Regardless, spending the time listening to these stories is sure a lot of fun. Hey, speaking of fun times, if you're new around here and you like what you hear, perhaps you might be interested in sticking around for a while. I feature brand new stories that you won't hear anywhere else. And what's better than brand new stories? I mean, let's face it. Surely you don't want to listen to the same stories all the time, do you? Well, that's it for today's video, my friends. Make sure to check out my Instagram for extra goodies. And with that, I'll see you all in the next video. As always, take care and have a wonderful day.